Chapter 25. Together in Hosu. Todoroki wasn't too sure why he was here. That sentence could be interpreted in many different ways. Sometimes he wondered what God decided to bless Father with his existence, and why. Was the only reason that he was here at all to become a hero that fulfilled Father's hungry ambition? He pondered why he was here, looking down at his phone, talking with friends. How did he get here to this point? Why did he not try before? He'd always seen friendship as an unnecessary preoccupation, an obstacle to his future that he'd rather not concern himself with. Now, he doesn't know how he got by without it. He also, sometimes, questioned why he'd taken up Father's offer to internship under him, rather than break free of his hold altogether, rebel by becoming a hero despite of his name, rather than because of it. But that wasn't why he was here at all. He wouldn't have gone if he hadn't visited his mother for the first time since... But that was all because of Canary. He didn't know if Canary really knew how much of that song meant to him, but there was something in the way he sang it. It almost seemed like it wasn't just trying to activate his quirk, but trying to truly convey the meaning to Todoroki, like he was trying to help him. He didn't know the truth, but he saw what little emotion displayed on Todoroki's face and took action. Todoroki looked forward to seeing him on the hero course. He deserved his place there. Todoroki really would never have visited his mother, gone to his father's agency, if it weren't for him. But, mainly, he wondered why he was here. Like, right here, in this moment. Hosu was a bleak, a strange city, out of the way of the hustle and bustle that Todoroki had come to be accustomed to. Yet, there was a certain darkness about the place. Every alleyway caught his eye. The strangers that lurked there glared back at him. It was as though the shadows had eyes. Todoroki walked a good distance behind his father and his sidekicks as they trooped through the streets. It didn't feel like a hero's patrol. They were supposed to make others feel safe and protected. But this felt more like a small army, marching their way to war. Father's menacing manner did not, in Todoroki's opinion, give hope to the citizens of Japan, but instead sparked a fear in everyone around him. They would shrink away in shame of any and all crimes that they may or may not have committed, all the way from theft in the local convenience store to that toy they stole from their friend back in nursery. He supposed it was effective. Endeavor may have been a pretty poor father, but he was the number 2 hero. There were things Todoroki could learn from him, although he might not follow in his footsteps in terms of how he went about these patrols. Maybe Canary would do it a little better, once he'd gotten used to the people gawking at him and taking pictures, that is. People stared at Todoroki too, but it wasn't the same. He hoped that, one day, it would be. He didn't want people to fear him like they feared his father. There was only so much Father could teach him. His friends, well, they taught him the rest. Arya and the aviary. Owl. I feel so sorry for that one kid from yesterday. He'll have a really bad fear of the dentist after this. But yeah, today was pretty quiet. Dove. Mine was the same as always. Super helpful though. Owl. I guess jogging around the city a million times will be helpful in the long run. That was an unintentional pun. Canary. We haven't stopped all day. Well, we did on the train. Your teacher is kind of scary though, but Shin's a fan. Raven. How are you running and typing at the same time? Canary. You're doing it too. Owl. By the fact that he's not replying, I'm assuming it's pretty difficult. Raven. Yes. Dove. Where are you running to? Canary. Wherever Mr. Aizawa runs to. Owl. Fair enough. Dove. Where are you running then? Canary. Hosu. Dove. Wait, you're in Hosu? Owl. Isn't that where Ida is? Puffin. It's where I am. Dove. Aw, we're missing out on the party. Puffin. It's not a party. Dove. Oh, you know what I meant. We could have all met up or something. Owl. Speaking of Ida, we haven't heard from him in a while. Dove. Yeah, I hope he's okay. It's really unlike him to stay so quiet. Kinda worried about him. Puffin. I haven't been here long, so I haven't been able to meet him. Dove. What about you guys? Canary? Shinso? Owl. They're probably pretty busy. I'm surprised Canary was able to text at all. Shinso seemed to be struggling with it. Hey, look over there! Todoroki looked up. One of Father's sidekicks was pointing at a column of smoke, climbing up into the night sky. Now he's actually focusing on the real world around him. He could hear the distant sound of panicked screams. They started to run. Todoroki shoved his phone into his pocket as he hurried to catch up. As they drew closer, an alarm started to blare. Whatever it was, it sounded serious. "Shoto!" Endeavor cried. "There's trouble ahead." He said it like it wasn't obvious. "I'll show you what it means to be a hero." But then, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. That was unfamiliar. A type of ringtone, if that was the correct terminology, that he wasn't used to. He slowed as he pulled out the device once more. Canary. Location set. "Damn it! You should be watching me!" Father exclaimed. He'd been rather irked by Todoroki constantly checking his phone the entire time, but this seemed to push him over the edge. Did the same for Todoroki. His breath hitched as he turned on his heel and ran. "Hey, wait! Where the hell are you going?" "An alleyway in 2410 Echo Street," he called over his shoulder, trying to keep the emotion out of his voice. "If you finish what you're doing or see extra pros, send them there." He didn't look back again, and Father didn't run after him. "I'm leaving you to take care of this trouble," he added after a second thought, not slowing down, and through gritted teeth he said, "I'm sure you can take care of it yourself." His friend might be in danger. This was it. Shinso was going to die. There were so many things he hadn't done. He hadn't gotten onto the hero course, proved he was more than a villain, made a difference in the world. He hadn't even brainwashed Bakugo into punching himself in the face. "Keep up the pace, Shinso," Eraserhead called back. He started to scale another building. Then there was frickin' Midoriya, who just started clambering up the weirdest way possible whilst glancing down at his phone at the same time. How in the actual hell? Dance should not have translated so easily into parkour. There had to be some kind of limit on how many things Midoriya could apply those skills to. Mr. Aizawa, no, Eraserhead, they were told to call him by that when they were out on patrol, had spent the entire morning, well, entire day, refining their skills in the subject. Cementos had constructed a labyrinth of structures for them to navigate through as quickly as possible, changing it whenever they reached the end of the course. Midoriya was a little clumsier at first, nothing to compare to Shinso though. But Eraserhead had taught them how to fall properly, how to jump farther, how to find the unlikeliest of footholds, and how to keep each other out of tricky situations. He was a good teacher. Shinso couldn't wait until he was a teacher for real, although he did keep reminding them that there was a possibility that he wouldn't be, that they hadn't really proved their worth yet. That was why Shinso was so determined to keep up. Didn't make it any easier though. This was so hard. He was going to die of exhaustion, and the other two would just leave him behind, face down in an alleyway somewhere. Maybe he was just being dramatic, though. Maybe watching Midoriya text and parkour at the same time was making him want to die. He had spent the last 5 minutes desperately trying to type that one sentence to send to the group chat in response to Midoriya's endless stream. He was quite sure Aizawa had seen Midoriya on his phone. He was also confident that the only reason he hadn't told him off for it was because he was pretty damn impressed that he hadn't tripped himself up whilst doing it, and was just waiting for that moment so it would teach Midoriya a lesson. He still hadn't, though. Shinso finally sent his message. Midoriya grinned back at him, hanging off a fire escape ladder a little further ahead than Shinso, and sent his response as him and Eraserhead waited for Shinso to catch up again. Mr. Aizawa was holding back for sure. He was barely using his scarf, ensuring that the two of them could see a way up that didn't require it. He definitely could have gone faster and further, but he didn't seem to mind. Shinso didn't have Eraserhead's spare scarf with him this time. He had another go at it that afternoon, but he still wasn't nearly adept at it enough to put it into action. He'd probably just tangle himself up and look like an idiot in front of everyone. They had been on rooftops for a while, after they left the train station, that was. They must have circled around a little, because Shinso could see the tracks up ahead, where the bullet train would shoot past. In fact, he could see in the distance one of the trains arriving was now. He should have been focusing less on the train and his phone, and probably a little more on what he was doing. Yes, he knew he was being a little hypocritical. It was when Siren let out a shrill shriek from Midoriya's side that Shinso looked up, about a second too late. There was another cry, not from Siren, not from any human that Shinso had ever heard, and he looked to his right, eyes widening, when a giant hulking beast pounced. "Shinso!" Midoriya screamed. Gray-blue skin and 4 blank eyes that zeroed in on Shinso's stunned self. It roared, a high-pitched, warbled thing, as it raised its hand to bring it crashing down on Shinso's skull. Aizawa was quick to react. He used his scarf to pull the monster away, just enough to let Shinso scramble out from underneath it, out from its deadly grasp. "What the heck is that thing?" Shinso exclaimed. The eyes of the beast turned in a way that almost made him gag, rolling in an exposed brain as it focused its time on Aizawa. It pulled the scarf away from itself in apparent ease and began to crawl its way towards him. He let his eyes glow red, but the erasing of its quirk didn't seem to bother the beast. Shinto clapped his hands frantically, trying to catch the monster's attention again. "Hey, hey, hey! Where the hell do you think you're going?" he tried, desperate for a response to activate his quirk with. But it didn't seem to care, and that's when Aizawa realized. Nomu. Flashes of the USJ attack were brought to the forefront of his mind, how he was unable to do nothing but to the beast that even All Might struggled to defeat. As it lashed out, Aizawa stepped back to evade. What else could he do? He didn't know what quirks it had, or how his erasure affected them. If he left it, it could go after other civilians. Shinso's quirk wasn't subduing it either. That only left... "Canary, I need you to use your quirk," he ordered. "Kill it!" What? The kid stammered. He had just pulled Shinso to his feet, standing well back from Aizawa's fight. "Do as I say! This isn't human! The same as USJ! It's a Nomu!" He tried desperately to explain, avoiding blow after blow. How long before the Nomu tried a new tactic, released one of its hidden abilities? The one that the USJ had many. What dangers could this one pose? "Do it, Midoriya!" Shinso insisted. Aizawa was vaguely aware of him grabbing Midoriya's left arm, flicking through the songs on the playlist he called his arsenal. Whatever they chosen was not played out loud. Aizawa was focusing so desperately on staying alive and making sure the beast didn't instead aim for his students that he didn't even acknowledge that Midoriya had started singing until the boy lunged forward himself, right past Aizawa, and into the arms of the Nomu. "Kid!" Aizawa exclaimed, but then, "Another one bites the dust!" It was gone. Midoriya fell to the ground, coughing on the clouds of dust around him, the dust that was once the Nomu. It was gone in seconds. Midoriya pulled the headphones away from his ears again, tapping on the device tied to his arm frantically in an attempt to stop the music that didn't reach Aizawa's ears. Hell, this kid was powerful, dangerously powerful. "Are you alright, Midoriya?" Shinso called, rushing forwards and kicking up the settling dust again. "No!" Midoriya exclaimed, pushing himself away from Shinso. "Don't touch!" "Hey, it's okay," Shinso insisted, raising his hands in mock surrender and stepping back a little. "You haven't used that song before. The power isn't gonna last long after you finish singing." "Good job, Midoriya," Aizawa said quickly, moving past his shock as Midoriya clambered to his feet, brushing the thick layer of dust from his trousers. "Sorry to make you do that," he was sure to add. The new hero student looked rather traumatized. I don't understand," he responded in barely a whisper. "What was that thing?" "A Nomu," Aizawa grimaced. "Some kind of monster. They have multiple quirks." "You said one attacked you at the USJ," Shinso recalled. "So, they're with the League of Villains." "Correct." Aizawa buried his face in his scarf to avoid breathing in any more of the dust-filled air. He didn't like the idea of having Nomu dust in his lungs. "So, they're here?" Midoriya realized, fidgeting with his hands, eyes wide in fear. Aizawa grated his teeth, glancing around the skyline of the city. Where could it have come from? Then he noticed an explosion, not far away, sending sparks and smoke billowing into the night. "Follow me," he instructed and took off once more. His students didn't hesitate to follow him. They were getting quicker on their feet. If everyone got out of this in one piece, it might actually be beneficial to them. They reached a rooftop overlooking the scene, and what a scene it was. "Midoriya," Aizawa breathed. It came out a lot quieter than he expected. He turned to him and cleared his throat. "I want you to build up a sleeping song. Can you do that? Has the cooldown ended from its using it this morning?" he questioned, thinking back to the time when they were testing Aizawa's erasure against Midoriya's quirk. No, sir," he replied, "but I have a second one." "Excellent. Start now." He was hesitant, his voice quiet and unsure, but he followed Aizawa's orders. That was more than what some of his other students could achieve, it seems. "Wait a second, let me catch my breath." Aizawa almost stopped and waited, not processing that it was part of the song. The USG incident had really done a number on him, it seemed. He was so preoccupied on how his students were faring that his brain simply wasn't as capable as processing the situation at hand. "Your lips are moving, I can't hear a thing." And somehow, Aizawa barely could. He didn't think it was a part of Canary's quirk, though. As they charged down the emergency fire escape stairs and onto the battlefield, the screams fell short of his ears as he gazed up at the winged Nomu and the giant bulky one the heroes were focusing their efforts on in the middle of the ring of destruction. "Hey, you a hero?" called out a blonde-haired woman wearing a green and white costume. "We need all hands on deck." "Canary!" Aizawa yelled back. He nodded shortly. "Anything for you." "Raven, try and brainwash them again," insisted Aizawa. "Yes, sir." "Melodies stuck inside your head." "Wait, aren't you—" the woman started, recognition shining in her eyes as she shielded her face from the flames nearby. "Sing with every breath." Canary charged forwards, ensuring he was as close as possible to the Nomu. Was there even a plural for that word? There shouldn't have been. There should have never been more than one for his power to work. He kept his distance as he chanted the lyrics repeatedly at the beasts. "Sing me to sleep." But the Nomu continued to roar, swatting at the other heroes like they were flies as they attacked at random. "To sleep now, sing me to sleep." Before the music could continue, Midoriya deactivated his speakers and microphone. It won't work, sir," he yelled back. They had spent hours ensuring that Midoriya could affect only the people, or non-people in this case, that he wanted to with his quirk. It was early days, but he should have been able to knock the Nomu out, so why— I don't think they can sleep," Midoriya cried, leaping back and away from the Nomu's grasp. "What the hell?" Shinso didn't seem to be having any luck either. Even when the Nomu cried out, his quirk simply wouldn't activate. "This isn't working," Shinso told him, falling back to his side. "Manual, stop the fire!" another hero cried, diverting Aizawa's attention. Manual? Aizawa turned his head to see the hero directing water, streaming from a broken fire hydrant, at the roaring flames. "Why'd you run off by yourself?" Manual cried bitterly. "Where the hell are you, Tenya?" "What?" Shinso and Midoriya must have heard that too, because both of their eyes widened in explicit fear for their friend. "Damn it," Aizawa thought, and Manual exclaimed at the same time. "Now what?" And then, if things couldn't get any worse, the stupid flying Nomu dropped the hero it was holding, his head slamming painfully into the concrete below, and it swooped and dived at the next closest person. Midoriya. The kid yelled out in fright as his little bird started squawking frantically, swooping around the Nomu's head as it climbed higher into the sky. "Midoriya!" Shinto called out to his friend as he desperately tried to pry the creature's claws open and release his shoulders. Aizawa activated his quirk in an attempt to stop the beast. His wings stopped moving, yes, but now he was just gliding away with his student in tow. "Use your quirk, Canary!" Aizawa yelled after him. The other Nomu had focused its rampage on Aizawa again now. He had no other choice than to protect Shinso, whose quirk simply wasn't effective in this scenario. "Protect yourself and protect others," he finished, and Midoriya disappeared into the distance. "Shoot, shoot, 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 shoot!" The Nomu's claws were clamped tightly around him, digging into the thick fabric of his jacket. As soon as they were out of sight of Mr. Aizawa, the Nomu started to flap its wings again, allowing them to turn tight corners around the buildings, taking him away from the fight. Where the hell was it going? Did it want to kill him? Did it want to take him to someone? Midoriya didn't understand, but didn't particularly want to find out. He had to sing something to kill the thing, although he really didn't want to do that again. Cyan was screaming, whizzing around the Nomu angrily, yet it didn't seem to be bothered by her. But then, all of a sudden, there was an ear-piercing screech. Nomu halted in the air abruptly, releasing Midoriya and tossing him into the sky as it reached up at his exposed brain in disgusting eyes. Midoriya's instincts took over. At least there was one song he was always happy to resort to. Wrap your wings! The great green wings burst from his back immediately, catching Midoriya in the air. He used his momentum to glide as far away from the Nomu as possible as the beast shrieked, spiraling out of the sky and crashing into the road below. Midoriya was headed in the opposite direction to where Mr. Ozawa and Shinso had been, singing one of his favorite songs softly under his breath as he flew. Ida. Manuel, the hero he was turning under, he'd lost him. Where could he be? Especially in such a dramatic time. Midoriya would expect him to be where the action was, lending a hand. And the attackers, they were Nomu too. The very type of beast which attacked 1A at the USJ. Surely Ida would want to help fight. Uraraka had said Ida had run to call for aid during the USJ attack and was disappointed with himself for not helping more. Why wouldn't he want to make up for it now? Or had he disappeared before the Nomu appeared? Actually, why were the Nomu in Hosu? It didn't make any sense. Just like, why was Ida in Hosu? Didn't he have better options for his internship? Wouldn't he want to avoid the place where his brother had been... Oh no, Ida. There was no turning back, and you said not to stare at the ground. But that was what Midoriya was doing now, whizzing through alleyway after alleyway in search of his friend. Perhaps he could have figured out some sort of tracking song, but then he would have had to sacrifice the speed that his wings granted him. And then, all of a sudden, a wailing cry filled Midoriya's ears from one of the abandoned streets he had just passed. You're still just a criminal who hurt my brother! And the gravity's pulling me down. With a flip and a turn, Midoriya gritted his teeth into a wobbly smile and stopped singing. He tucked his wings close to his body and rocketed down, right into the chest of the hero killer. Earlier that evening. You must be one of the ones who attacked UA, Stain realized, hovering by the door to the dingy pub that dwindling league of villains seemed to call home. You want to recruit me to build up your little group again. The shaggy-haired man opposite him smiled underneath the dismembered hand that covered his face. Yeah, he said simply. It'll be great. You've got so much experience. Stain narrowed his eyes. And what is your mission? An important question. Without true motivation and commitment, the League would be nothing but an obstacle to Stain's own cause. I want to destroy anything I don't like, Shigaraki continued. He picked up a small photo that had been lying, face down, on the bar counter beside him. Showing it to the hero killer by holding it between his thumb and forefinger, he revealed the smiling face of a young, green-winged boy flying high in the air above UA's sports festival stadium. Canary. That includes this little brat here. Stain knew of this kid. He had watched little of the sports festival. He wasn't sure how much he approved of the country pitting its children against each other, fighting mercilessly in an arena for their entertainment. It was like all they cared about was who was the strongest, not who could actually make for a real hero. However, that didn't leave him free from the purge of the media. Canary dominated headlines, sharing the front page with Stain's noble actions. He had hoped that the next generation of heroics could finally make a change, but this Canary just showed that it would be more and more of the same. Spoiled kids with unfathomable abilities, beating up those who society labeled as villainous for nothing more than the fame and the glory. What else don't you like? Stain pushed. The villain almost laughed. Putting down the photograph, he pointed back at a torn picture adorning the drab stone walls. All Might, he hissed. I want him dead. For a second there, Stain had been hopeful. What meaning is there to killing if you don't have real convictions? He had been a fool to think they could offer him anything. Stain fell, tumbling across the alleyway as the green mass kicked at his stomach. He got to his feet quickly, narrowing his eyes at the sight before him. In the shadow of the alley, the figure that now stood before him resembled an angel, coming to take the dead away. But as he regained focus, the reality became clear. There was another child there, one with great green wings and a gritted smile, headphones hanging around his neck, his fists raised and ready. Canary. You, Stain hissed, quickly recovering from the blow the boy had dealt, reasserting the grip on his blade. He watched the boy's eyes flicker from the injured ignium on the ground beneath him, and then widen as he zeroed in on Native, rested against the wall not far behind Stain. At least it wasn't entirely focused on just attacking the villain. Canary pulled something from his pocket, hiding whatever it was behind his right wing and fiddling with it for a moment before sliding it out of view once more. Midoriya? The younger ignium stammered, clenching his teeth as he bit through the pain. Please, fly away. This doesn't involve you. Go on, Stain hissed, but the boy didn't move. Fly home, little bird. If you choose to stay, that fight will have been your last. But he hoped he would stay and fight. It would guarantee his demise, and a brighter future for the word hero. Neither of these children deserved that title. If they didn't now, they never will. One's nature does not change with ease. No, Canary retorted, seemingly forcing the word from his throat. If I go, both of you will die. I won't let that happen. Stain narrowed his eyes, waiting to see what his new opponent would attempt next. Please, Ignium sobbed. I should be the one. You're not even a hero. Well, neither are you, Canary replied, his voice suddenly louder, freer, as if the pressure to succeed had been so great that it overcame his fear of the danger he faced. And I don't care what people call me. I have the power to make a difference now. If I don't use it to help anyone I can, then what's the point of it all? Stain felt a smile creeping across his face. Maybe he had been wrong about this fledgling hero. Canary ruffled his feathers. Stain watched as several fell to the floor before his friend. And forwards, he leapt. His grin on full display, Stain reached his sword and sliced through the air. The sound of metal clanging against the concrete floor filled his ears. Wind from under Canary's wings blew the fabric of Stain's mask as he rocketed himself around him. The kid was adept in the air. Stain would give him that. Stain could see his plan. He was smart, maneuvering himself in Stain's blind spots, yet close to his body, so his enemy didn't have the space to lash out. His movements were elegant, fast, but with all the benefits that wings could grant, there was still one unavoidable issue. The large surface area gave Stain more options to strike. In the cloud of falling feathers that Canary left in his wake, Stain used a second blade to aim at what remained. If it weren't for Stain's quirk, Canary could have continued that fight. He had kicked him in the jaw. How? Stain wasn't sure. The feathers disoriented him. But now Canary was on the ground, wings all but gone, and a bloody feather dangling off the end of Stain's knife, spilling its precious contents all over the blade. Before Canary's quirk faded, Stain had done what he needed to do. Canary's own body betrayed him, the paralysis forcing him to remain close to the ground, his mouth barely able to move, let alone sing his precious songs. The remaining feathers faded into nothingness as Stain kicked at them, marching back to complete his mission. There are countless heroes out there who are all talk, Stain told his audience. I thought you were one of them. I don't know if I'm wrong yet, but I'll let you stay alive. For now. He glared down at the little Ignium. You're different from these two. He tilted his head back to take in the look on Canary's face, one of unadulterated horror, as he croaked out a desperate plea. No, stay away. Stain felt like he was the honored executioner of an old king, performing the duty that few could stomach, but it was something that needed to be done. He held his sword above the hero's throat. May your death bring about a better world, he smiled, knowing it would be the last thing the second Ignium ever saw. And with Canary's terrified scream, Stain plunged. Too late. He leapt backwards, past Canary, to avoid the funnel of fire thrown in his direction. Now what? Stain hissed. And his eyes rested upon yet another interference. A third boy, his left side alight with flames, and on his right, a tiny green bird rested. You need to give me more details in times like this, Canary, said the interferer. He raised his phone, its light filling the alleyway alongside his fire. If it weren't for Siren, I might not have been here on time to stop this guy. Stain sighed. This day has just been full of distractions. Shinso would have been surprised by how good he was at keeping up with Eraserhead in that moment if he weren't so focused on the task at hand, which was probably a good thing. They followed the trail of panic and destruction across the city. It was surprisingly difficult to do, but Midoriya was out there somewhere, maybe even hurt by that flying Nomu thing, so they had to keep going. "Heads up, kid," Eraserhead suddenly exclaimed. They were at the end of a wide road, completely devoid of traffic. A couple of civilians were backing away from a familiar gray-skinned beast, wailing and screaming helplessly as it crawled towards them. Eraserhead didn't hesitate. He jumped into action immediately, his scarf wrapping around the Nomu's neck as he pulled it back and the couple had the opportunity to run. The monster pulled it away as easily as the last one had, whilst flapping its wings about. That was when Shinso realized Aizawa's scarf wasn't so white anymore. Shinso gaped at the Nomu. One of its eyes was barely intact, gushing red. It cried out, turning its head to roll its remaining eyes towards Shinso, deciding with whatever brain power it had left that it would be his next target. Only, it didn't get that far. Shinso shielded his own eyes from the bright light as flames engulfed the winged creature. It was Endeavor? Then where was... Shinso looked frantically as he stumbled backwards, but Endeavor was alone. Todoroki was nowhere to be seen. As Nomu fell to the ground, either unconscious or dead, Endeavor stood over it, victorious, with a satisfied sneer. Mr. Aizawa was quick to come up with the same conclusion as Shinso had. "Endeavor, where is your son?" he demanded, holding a scarf away from his face as to not touch the blood that marred it. The number 2 hero focused on him with a moment of confusion, before recognition washed over his expression. "Eraserhead, what are you doing in Hosu?" "Could ask you the same question." "Isn't it obvious?" Endeavor grinned. "I'm here because I'm a hero. I am wherever I'm needed." "Right, so the hero killer has nothing to do with it." Shinso would have laughed if he wasn't so preoccupied on the fact that there was now 3 of his friends were missing in action. His grin morphed into a snarl before another explosion from back where Shinso had lost Midoriya sent another plume of smoke into the air. "I'm needed elsewhere," said Endeavor, "but I have a job for you." "Is it looking after your son? Because I already do that." Endeavor's flames grew that little bit brighter. He ran off to a strangely specific location, an alleyway in 2410 Echo Street. "I can kill these stupid beasts. You can head over there." Aizawa looked like he was more than ready to prove that he could kill him. How did he get the location? His phone, how else? The hero clearly didn't see hanging around as something worth his precious time. He proceeded to take off towards the action without another word, leaving Shinso to come to a profound realization, pulling his own phone out from his pocket. "Midoriya sent his location," Shinso breathed, showing it to Mr. Aizawa in such haste that he almost dropped it. And so, they ran. Shinso had done more running in those last few days than he'd done for a really long time. But he was so pumped up on adrenaline that he didn't even feel his muscles ache in protest as he led the way across the rooftops and dinky streets towards his friends. He had hoped that Midoriya was simply lying, injured in an alleyway somewhere, now attended by Todoroki. But, as his mind was cast back to a conversation of theirs earlier that day, he had a terrible, sinking feeling that he was wrong. Earlier that afternoon. "Hosu?" Midoriya stammered. "We're going to Hosu?" Shinso was just as confused, clutching onto the train ticket that Mr. Aizawa had just given him in one hand as he fiddled with his persona cords with the other. They caught quite a few glances as they walked through the train station in full hero costume. Well, that was mainly because of Midoriya, most likely. "I told you to contact your guardians, didn't I? We'll be back late tonight," Mr. Aizawa explained as they finally boarded the train. Midoriya had taken this long to finally muster the courage to question why. Shinso just couldn't be bothered to ask at all. "Isn't Ida in Hosu?" Shinso remembered vaguely as they sat down. Midoriya was by the window seat with Shinso next to him. Mr. Aizawa just across the aisle, mildly displeased by the snoring, overweight man in the seat beside him. "That's not a coincidence, is it?" "It wouldn't make a difference if it was," his Shinso simply replied. "Anyway, the city's on high alert. There shouldn't be much criminal activity around the main areas. That leaves us with the freedom to practice your skills in the more distant streets." That's because of the hero killer, right?" Midoriya pondered, staring up at Siren, nestled in his hair as the train started to move. "Correct," Mr. Aizawa replied through gritted teeth. Shinso narrowed his eyes. Wasn't Ida's brother hurt by the hero killer? Could that be the reason he chose to go to Hosu in the first place? He's probably still there, Midoriya continued, his voice quiet, but loud enough for Shinso and Aizawa to listen in. Whether he was just talking to himself or legitimately to them was unclear. He's appeared in 7 other locations so far, and always attacks multiple heroes, usually at least 4, but Ignium is the only one he's confronted in Hosu. It means it's very likely he will reappear there to attack someone else, probably somewhere really out of the way where there aren't many people. We're not planning on fighting the hero killer, kid, Mr. Aizawa was quick to interject. Yeah, I know, Midoriya panicked. Anyway, you'd probably be a good matchup against him. Your quirk would cancel his out. They're not too sure what it is yet, but they think it's something paralysis-based, considering what the heroes who survived him had said. How many survived? Shinso frowned, generally interested in the subject now. 24, including Ida's brother, answered Midoriya. I think he's killed 17, though. Before Shinso could shudder at the very thought of the man, Mr. Aizawa added, How do you know all this, Midoriya? He started to panic again. I just saw a lot of stuff on it about TV and the internet. I wanted to know more about Ida's older brother, and I kind of ended up researching. He believes that most heroes are false, and that All Might is one of the only true heroes. Ah, that's how he knows all these random facts, Shinso grinned. He starts by looking up one thing, and ends up falling down a rabbit hole of unnecessary information. That researching hobby of yours might be useful, Aizawa eventually concluded. Principal Nezu sure has taken a liking to you because of it. Midoriya just blinked at him. Shinso raised an eyebrow. Yeah, well, he did praise you for blackmailing him. He began sputtering nonsense about how the definition of blackmail did not correlate with what he did to Principal Nezu. Shinso just laughed. There were few who could really make him laugh harder than Midoriya. Siren was sitting by Ida's hand. He could barely focus on anything else. His eyes were blurry from the tears that consistently threatened to pour down his face. The fact that his glasses were long gone didn't help matters either, but nonetheless, he could still see the glow of Todoroki's hot fire and the steam rising from his eyes. He could see Midoriya too, but barely hear the gentle tune that echoed from his lips. His skin had melted into kind of a silvery metal. Stain's blade simply glanced off it. Ida was really crying now, blind to the pain in his arm and the great, ugly sobs racked his body. Siren cocked her head to one side, chirping at him softly. The fight had been going on for a while. At least, it felt like that to Ida. It felt like an eternity. No. Stop. Ida sobbed. Stain had just wrecked Midoriya's mouthguard. A swift kick with those spiked shoes of his cracked Midoriya's hardened skin. He lay paralyzed again, metal vanishing from his complexion, but leaving a bleeding, cracked wound on the side of his jaw. You have to run! There were knives in Todoroki's left arm. He continued to use his quirk regardless, the blood sizzling on the surface of his skin. I can't watch this. You want to make your brother proud? Todoroki suddenly cried. Ida's eyes widened. He looked past the little bird, trying his hardest to focus on Todoroki's indistinct form. Then stand up and be Ignium. Become the hero he wanted you to be. Ida used a powerful kick to send Stain flying backwards. At the same time, Midoriya's muscles were finally freed from Stain's curse of a quirk. He wouldn't be able to activate titanium again. Perhaps he should use the speed song. With Ida by his side, they could actually overpower the hero killer. But then, I've had enough of this! The villain yelled. Ida was dripping blood everywhere. How Stain had gotten more of it wasn't too big of a problem to solve. He cried out in absolute agony as his body seized up once more. Not because of physical pain, though, but for how much it was costing his grieving mind. Todoroki raised his injured arm to attack once more, as Midoriya bit through the pain to start to sing again. But Stain had other plans. He grasped the collar of Midoriya's jacket, plucking him towards his sword. He only needed to take another dose of blood from his cheek to render him motionless again. Another move and I will rid this world of Canary. Todoroki froze. Not in a literal sense. His breathing was as heavy and frantic as Midoriya's, and he wasn't being held at knife point. There was a manic squawk. Midoriya turned his head slightly to see Todoroki grasp Siren from the air, trying to stop her from attacking. But it was no use. She wrestled free of his hand, which was too weak to hold her for long. She hurtled towards the hero killer. She aimed straight for his face, but Stain was not deterred. With astonishingly quick reflexes, he batted her away harshly, sending her crashing to the ground beside the native, whose blood group meant he still hadn't been freed from Stain's power after the first time. He gazed momentarily at the blood that had appeared on his hand. It must have come from Siren, as she hovered close to Ida's fallen self, or to Todoroki's injured arm. If Shinso had been there, perhaps he would have made a sassy remark about it being rather dangerous to lick strange blood off your hand. But when Todoroki crumpled to the ground too, despite how little the volume of blood that Stain must have tasted, any thoughts of a happier time quickly faded from Midoriya's mind. They had lost. The fanatical eyes of Stain turned slowly back to Midoriya, still hanging from his iron grip. He needed to sing something. Anything. He could at least still use his mouth, force the words out. Whether he could hold a tune or not was still up for debate. He would have tried, if the knife wasn't still dangerously close to his skin. The villain gazed at him for a moment, as if staring into his soul and judging its worth, until finally, he let him go. "Don't make me regret letting you live," he said, in a way that strangely resembled Mr. Aizawa when he lets another expulsion threat slide. Oh, how he prayed for him to hurry around the corner in that moment, as Stain's heavy footsteps echoed through the alleyway, marching back towards his fallen friends. If only Shinso was there, he could stop Stain in no time. He was definitely talkative enough to trick into submission. If Jiro was there, she could distract him even whilst paralyzed, hold him off until the timer of his quirk ran out. Yororaka could remove his advantage in a familiar terrain, see how he likes it when gravity was his enemy too. Even Kasumi's mist could provide an advantage. Or Mina's acid. Stain would probably poison himself if he dared ingest. That's it! His voice filled the musky air. It was almost painful to bite through the clutches of Stain's quirk, but it was just weak enough to let him sing the song, if not slowly. "You're toxic, I'm slipping under." Stain hesitated, glaring back at Midoriya. He narrowed his eyes as he tried to figure out what he could possibly be attempting. Little did he know, Midoriya wasn't using his power on him. He was using it on everyone else, and their blood. "Don't you know that you're toxic?" But that was what he was. Toxic to this world. It wasn't false heroes that were a poison to society, but villains like him. "Don't you know that you're toxic?" Stain had started to walk back over to Midoriya, perhaps to finally silence him. But before he could even attempt it, his sword fell to the floor by Ida's face as he clutched his stomach in obvious pain. He kept singing while Stain struggled against what had come over him, desperate to stand and march once more. "Don't you know that you're toxic?" But Ida was right by him. He may have been paralyzed, but that didn't stop him from activating his quirk. "Slowly, it's taking over me." There was a great flash of light from his engines as his legs swung wildly up from the ground. He had no control over its direction. Yet, despite that, it made contact with Stain's already injured chin, making him bite down hard on his tongue. He stumbled backwards, coughing up his own blood as he fell closer to Midoriya. Now he let his quirk affect them all. "Losing my head, spinning round and round." Stain cried out in agony as he pushed himself to his feet, pulling another knife from his sleeve. "Do you feel me now?" And he kicked out at Canary, further damaging his injured cheek to stop him from singing. The villain seemed manic now, far more than before. "You are too much of a trouble to keep alive," he cried, and lifted the blade above his throat. "No!" Todoroki yelled behind him. All Midoriya could do was watch, the moonlight glinting off that blade as Stain lifted him off the ground again, ready to take his life. A booming laughter filled his ears, and Stain faltered. That was an awfully familiar sound. It was one that filled Midoriya's childhood, the sound of the world's greatest hero. "Knock, knock!" Stain coughed, his breathing harsh and ragged as his eyes flickered across the alleyway. Who is... He dropped Midoriya on the floor, the knife only leaving a sliver of red behind on his skin. And Stain stood perfectly still, his arms flopping down beside him and his weapon falling by Midoriya's face. Midoriya forced his head off the ground, but at the end of the street was... not All Might, Shinso grinned.